We have a new series starting this week, spoken by Mark Pomeroy, called You'll Be Glad You Did. We hope you enjoy.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us, and a very happy new year to you. 2024, new year, new opportunities. And so we're kicking off a brand new series. Now, let me just set things up. Chances are most of us have lived long enough to have reaped the benefits of some good decisions we've made and some good habits we've developed. And also, let's be honest, most of us have probably lived long enough to have dealt with the consequences of some bad decisions we've made or some bad habits we've developed. This kind of like, well, we're glad we did, or, oh, we wish we had. Glad we didn't, or, I wish we hadn't. One of the clearest signs that we're maturing as humans is when we start to connect the dots, when we start to appreciate the reality that decisions that we make today will have an impact on what's going to happen tomorrow. So we're launching this brand new series at the beginning of 2024 called You'll Be Glad You Did. And full disclosure, I'm going to be teaching some things that I either wish I'd known in my 20s or wish I'd put into practice in my 20s. And basically, I'm going to give some very unoriginal, timeless advice. So look, this series is probably going to go through the month of January, maybe spill over into February. I would strongly encourage you, invite you to be a part of this every single week and really let God unpack how you can set the beginning of 2024 up and look back at the end of 2024 to think to yourself, based on what you've learned and what you put into practice, I'm glad I did. The advice we're going to give sits squarely in the category of wisdom. I'm not going to teach rules. We're not going to teach necessarily right versus wrong, although it may spill over into that. Not going to teach morals, although some of what we teach may spill over into that. But really the focus is going to be on this big idea of wisdom. Now, you can go online, you can check all the dictionaries, you can find a bunch of definitions, I'm sure. I'm going to just run with this one. Wisdom is insights informed by the knowledge that life is connected. That we search for wisdom and stumble across wisdom and apply wisdom and prioritize wisdom when we start to understand that life is connected, that today shapes tomorrow, that one thing leads to another. And I'll give you some examples of how this plays out and the importance of wisdom in decision making. Here's a great principle for life. Don't trade, this is a wise principle, don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. You know, if you have financial goals, don't do something stupid now financially that's going to rob you of what you ultimately want. If you're currently studying, don't do something now that's going to rob you of the academic goals that you want to achieve. This same principle applies to everything. It applies to marriages, relationships. I mentioned finances, health. Don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. Now, ignoring this principle isn't necessarily illegal or immoral. It's just unwise. Ignoring it is a bad idea. So we're going to just continue to lean into this vital principle of wisdom. Here's a couple of things that wisdom does. Number one, wisdom serves as a guide. The reality is that where you are today and where I am today in life, that we've, for the most part, steered ourselves to this current position based on the succession of decisions we've made to now. Good decisions get us to where we want to go. Unwise decisions take us away from where we want to go. And wisdom kind of fills in the gap, serving as a guide, particularly when we're not sure and we don't have clarity to make a decision. And when we're not sure, when it's not obvious, when it's not like black or white, this is where we ask the question, what's the wise thing to do? One of the books that's imprinted this concept on me more than any other book is this book here by Andy Stanley, The Best Question Ever. And he asks this question. I mean, essentially, this is the premise of the book. Is this the best question ever? What's the wise thing to do? What's the wise thing for me to do? And in this book, Andy actually unpacks this question on 3 levels. And he says it this way: in light of my past experience, in light of my current circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what I've done, what I've experienced, what I'm currently experiencing, where I currently am, and where I want to go, in light of my past experience, my current circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? And asking this question on these 3 levels often brings instant clarity. It's really quite remarkable principle. So wisdom serves as a guide. And the second thing that wisdom does is it sets up guardrails. It keeps us a safe distance from danger. And we all need moral, financial, relational, career, health guardrails. See, a life fact is that our greatest regrets are often preceded by a series of unwise decisions that took us over the guardrails. So, here's an example. If you're currently making a series of unwise relational decisions, then understand that you're moving towards a relational regret. And this can be a little sneaky because oftentimes when we make the first of a series of unwise decisions, when we make that first unwise decision, often we don't start to experience the negative consequences in that moment. The negative consequences often don't come till later after we've made a series of unwise decisions. That's why we think maybe we got away with it. Maybe no one noticed. Maybe it wasn't that big of an unwise decision. But it's very rarely that it's one unwise decision that takes us into the danger zone. It's almost always we arrive at the place of regret after a series of unwise decisions. For example, if you're currently in the process of making some unwise financial decisions, and someone in your sphere who's actually pretty wise with finances starts to say to you, I don't really know about that. Well, it's quite likely that you're moving towards a financial regret. And this is this idea of wisdom serving as a guardrail. It actually keeps us and protects us from unnecessary regret. Andy Stanley, I mentioned the book a moment ago, The Best Question Ever. He made this statement: culture will bait you to the threshold of self-destruction and then condemn you once you step through the door. You know, bait you like buy this, try this, do this, start this, stop this, go here, spend time with them. And then if you do those things, particularly a series of those things, and start to experience the negative consequences and the regret, the same culture starts calling you a fool. How could you be so stupid? Wisdom has the power to keep us a safe distance from the edge of the danger zone. Now, we're a church. I'm a preacher. This is the point where you might well be asking yourself, like, is this a church message? This sounds a little bit like afternoon television. Well, here we go. You've got your smartphone camera. How about you scan this flow code? It's going to take you to Matthew chapter 7. Now, Matthew is one of Jesus' handpicked followers. He was one of 4 of Jesus' biographers. This is the first one that's kind of slotted into the Bible. And I'm going to take you to this, a piece of what's now kind of called the Sermon on the Mount. And this was not only Jesus' most famous message or sermon. Scholars believe it was kind of his go-to. Like, he didn't just preach this once. This was kind of like where he traveled around and preached. This would be his go-to message. This was like the greatest hits packaged into one thing. Like, I've come all this way from heaven, and this is like the most important things I want you to know about. And so they just heard this very long message, and Jesus is going to land the Sermon on the Mount. And this is what he says to them. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And everyone in his audience would have known exactly what that meant for the wise man. It would have meant that it would have been harder than building the house on another surface, like sand, which I'm going to come to in a moment. It would have taken more sacrifice. It would have been more costly. It would have been harder. That it would have been maybe sort of tempting to go the easier route, take some shortcuts. But Jesus labeled this guy as wise. And then said, well, then the rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. See, we start to see that wisdom is actually baked into the teaching of Jesus. This guy's house, this guy's life is the metaphor, survived the storms, because he did the wise thing. And then Jesus contrasts it. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And essentially, when Jesus is talking about this person being foolish, it's that they failed to grasp the notion that life is connected, that today's decisions, today's shortcuts, will ultimately impact tomorrow, will ultimately lead to tomorrow's regrets. And Jesus is taking us away from that kind of thinking. He's encouraging us to appreciate that life is connected. Now, let me just insert a bonus thought, and then we'll continue. And I insert this bonus thought every year when we teach our series on financial management, which I think is probably going to be our next series launching in February. Because this is kind of the point where some people might push back and say, tomorrow. No, Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. Which is true, by the way. He did teach that we shouldn't worry about tomorrow, but he didn't teach that we shouldn't plan for tomorrow. He didn't teach that we shouldn't make wise decisions today, recognizing that those decisions will have an impact tomorrow and actually will set us up for a better tomorrow. And in fact, the very notion of making wise decisions today means we'll be less likely to have to worry about tomorrow. So Jesus is calling us to this wise way of doing life, and it underscores a very important distinction, a very important truth when it comes to Jesus' motivation for his teaching. Jesus taught for our benefit, not our detriment. And this may be breaking news to some of you. Some of you maybe grew up in a church where the only kind of angle that you heard, or the angle you heard a lot of, was about God wanting to limit you, what you can't do, things. And actually, Jesus is talking about wisdom serving as a guide, and wisdom setting up guardrails is actually not trying to limit you, but actually to position you to live in the sort of freedom that he came to bring us. He's not trying to take something from us. He's trying to set us up for something better. In fact, what you learn as you diligently follow Jesus and put his words into practice consistently is that following Jesus will ultimately make your life better, not trouble-free, but ultimately, not instantly, but ultimately make your life better and make you better at life, make you a better spouse, make you a better parent, make you a better employer, make you a better employee, make you a better friend. Because that's the nature of wisdom. Wisdom is about investing now so we can get a return later. It's about maybe sacrificing now so we can have something better later. It's about doing the hard thing now so we can actually not have such a hard challenge in life later. It's about investing now so we'll have something to show for it later. Investing in our marriage now. Investing in our kids now. Investing in our education now. And yes, even investing financially now. Making those sorts of sacrifices, being intentional, exercising wisdom, understanding that the things that we do, the investments, the decisions we make today will have an impact on tomorrow. Okay, so back to the story that Jesus taught. He compared and contrasted these two people. One he called wise, one he called foolish. One, he said, built their house on the rock, one built on the sand. Characterized them simply by the virtue of the fact that the one that built their house on the rock was the one that listened to Jesus' teaching and put it into practice. The other one listened to Jesus' teaching but didn't put it into practice. And it underscores this big idea that knowing and doing are two completely different experiences with two completely different outcomes. And you know this. Now, I could cynically say you know this if you're a parent of teenagers, but don't want to be about the teenagers at this point. Think about yourself. Have you ever been the recipient of someone giving you some wise advice? And you found yourself saying to them, look, I know, you don't need to tell me. But then you realize they're not telling you because they assume you don't know. They're telling you because it's obvious that you're not putting it into practice. That there's a difference between knowing and doing. You see, knowing isn't enough. In fact, think about it this way. Knowing without doing will actually lead you to the exact same outcome as not knowing at all. It's applied truth. It's applied wisdom that makes the difference. It's the doing, not just the knowing, that makes the difference. So, as we're stepped into a brand new year, as we're launching this brand new series and we're asking the questions about wisdom and what you're doing and what you're not doing and how that's going to impact your tomorrow, not just January, not just 2024, but potentially years, decades, even generations. Here's my question. I'm going to leave you with this. Just remember, I love you, my friends. I hope it stays this way. What do you know you need to do now, this month, this week, this year, but you just aren't doing it? And I can't answer that question for you, but ponder that. You might already know the answer. You might be like, I'm not sure. Search for the answer to that question and start to wisely apply yourself to that thing. Now, little bonus, scan this QR code. It's going to take you to the Bible app. And throughout this series, every single week, we're going to launch a featured plan, a Bible reading plan that we're kind of all doing together. We want to get as many people from Elevate, friends and family, on this every week and just continue to go through this journey together so God can take us on a super deep dive into this area of making wise decisions. All right, we will see you back here next week, and be sure to invite someone, bring them, sit them on your couch, feed them, give them something to drink, and let's let God set us up for a better 2024.